I want to say something that is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Society lied to you. Not once, not about one thing. Systematically, consistently, from the moment you were old enough to understand what was expected of you, about what success looks like, what failure looks like, what a good life is supposed to contain, and in what order, and by what age, and measured by what standard. You were handed a script, and most of you are still following it, and some of you are still following it. Maybe many of you are following it, while something quiet and persistent inside you keeps asking whether the destination this script is leading you toward is actually somewhere you want to go. I followed that script for 40 years. I followed it faithfully. I did what was expected. I built what was supposed to be built. I measured myself against the measurements society gave me, and I spent 4 decades trying to meet them. And at 62, sitting in a life that looked, from the outside, like a reasonable success, I understood something that rearranged everything. The measurements were wrong, not slightly off, fundamentally, structurally, in the wrong direction wrong. And I had spent the best years of my physical life chasing numbers on a scale that was never designed with my actual well-being in mind. That is what I want to talk about today. But before I go any further, if anything I say today lands in a place that feels true, please like this video. Share it with someone who is still running a race they didn't choose. And subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. These are the conversations I needed at 30. Every share means they reach someone who might still have time to stop and look at the track they're on. It takes 2 seconds, and it could change everything. Now, here is what society told me, what it told most of us, so consistently and from so many directions that it stopped sounding like a message and started sounding like reality. It told me that success was measurable, that you could look at a life and assess it, grade it, rank it, determine its value based on visible outputs, income, title, property, the right neighborhood, the right school for the children, the right vehicle, the right trajectory, progress that could be confirmed from the outside, because the outside was, implicitly, who mattered. It told me that more was the direction, always more. More income, more status, more square footage, more security, more achievement stacked on top of previous achievement. The end point was never defined, because more by its nature has no end point. You were simply supposed to keep going in the direction of more, and feel, at each stage, that you were succeeding if you had more than you had before. It told me that the people who didn't accumulate, who chose simplicity over status, meaning over measurability, their own definition of enough over society's definition of more, were failures, were opting out, were making the best of a situation where they hadn't been capable of doing better, that their contentment was not genuine contentment, but the rationalization of people who had tried the race and lost it. I believed all of it. For 40 years I believed all of it, so thoroughly that I had stopped being able to see it as a belief. It felt like the shape of reality, like the way things simply were. Then reality pushed back, and I want to tell you what it showed me. Does any of this sound like the water you are swimming in right now? Not the ideology you consciously hold, but the actual assumptions underneath your daily choices. The unexamined measurements you are applying to your own life every day without having chosen them. The moment reality pushed back arrived not as a liberation, but as a collapse. I was 62, and the version of success I had been building, the career, the accumulation, the forward momentum, hit a wall. Not a crisis of my own making entirely. The industry changed. The position evaporated. The income that had been the primary measurement of whether I was on track disappeared with a speed that left me stunned at how little actual solidity there had been underneath it. And I sat for the first time in 40 years with nothing to point to as evidence of my forward motion, and I felt the full weight of something I had never examined. I had outsourced my sense of my own value entirely to external measurement. My worth as a person, my confidence, my peace, my basic sense of being okay, had been so completely tied to the visible metrics that when the metrics disappeared, there was almost nothing left underneath them. Not because I was a shallow person, but because I had put everything into the race and almost nothing into understanding who I was when I wasn't running it. That was a frightening discovery, more frightening, honestly, than the job loss itself. The job loss was a practical problem. What I found underneath it was a philosophical one. I had been building on sand, and the tide had just come in. And then in the forced stillness of that period, something unexpected happened. I started paying attention to the people I had spent 40 years dismissing. My brother-in-law, a man who had worked in a trade his entire life, who had never had an impressive title, who had never earned what I earned, who owned a small house and drove a vehicle that had years on it, and who, when you actually sat with him, without the condescension I had been bringing to the table for decades, without admitting it, was visibly, unmistakably, genuinely at peace. Not performing peace, containing it. The way certain people carry something so real and settled inside them that it changes the quality of the air when they're in the room. He had had it. I began to realize, for as long as I had known him. While I had been measuring him against standards he had never agreed to be measured by, and finding him wanting, he wasn't wanting, he was full. In a way I had never managed in 40 years of following the script, and I started thinking about why, and the more I thought, the more honestly I was willing to think, the more the answer became uncomfortable. He had never accepted the script, not rebelliously, not as a statement. He had simply, at some point that I never witnessed, looked at what the world was asking of him and decided that the trade it was offering, your time and peace and presence, in exchange for status and accumulation, was not a trade he wanted to make. And he had built a life that reflected his own definition of enough, rather than society's definition of more. And society called him ordinary. Society called him unremarkable. Society would have called him, in the vocabulary I had spent 40 years using without examining it, not particularly successful. He was the most successful person I knew. I had just been using the wrong measurement. Here, if this is reaching somewhere real, please take 1 second. Hit like. Share this with someone still running the race that someone else designed. Subscribe if you haven't. These realizations cost me 40 years to arrive at. Knowing they reach you while you still have something to do with them is the whole point. Let me tell you what following the wrong script cost me. Not in the abstract, in the specific reality of a life examined at 74, with the kind of honesty that only becomes fully available when you have enough distance from the performing to see it clearly. It cost me presence. The real kind, not the physical presence of a body in a room, but the quality of attention that makes presence actually mean something. I was there for a great deal of my life in the technical sense. At the table, in the room, in the conversation. But the part of me that was tracking, the part managing the career, monitoring the trajectory, calculating the next move in the direction of more, that part never fully rested, never fully arrived. The people I was with got the portion of me that wasn't already somewhere else, which for most of my working life was not the larger portion. It cost me my relationship with enough. I never developed one, not a real one, not the felt, practiced, genuine relationship with the concept of having what you need and finding it sufficient. The script had no room for enough. Enough was where you paused on your way to more. It was a waypoint, not a destination. And because I never stopped there, never sat still long enough to learn what it felt like, I arrived at each new level of accumulation with the same faint dissatisfaction I had started with. More never produced the feeling more had promised. But I kept believing the next increment would be different. It cost me decades of someone else's definition of my life. That is the one that sits most heavily. I spent 40 years measuring myself against standards I had not chosen, working toward destinations I had not genuinely selected, using someone else's framework to determine whether I was doing well or falling short. And inside that framework, I was frequently stressed and occasionally anxious, and always at some background level aware that the goal kept moving. Because that is what the script requires. The goal must keep moving. A population that reaches enough and stops is not a productive population. The script is not designed for your flourishing. It is designed for your continued participation. I was a participant for 40 years before I understood I had a choice. Now I want to speak to you directly, without the softening. Look at the life you are building right now, the choices you are making about your time and your energy and what you are working toward. And ask yourself honestly, whose definition of success are you using? Not the answer you give in polite conversation, the real answer, the measurement you are actually applying to yourself. When the lights are low and the performance has stopped, and it is just you, and the honest assessment of whether you are where you are supposed to be. Where did that measurement come from? Did you choose it? Did you sit down at some point in your adult life and deliberately decide, this is what a good life looks like? This is what I am working toward. This is the finish line I have selected for myself, and it reflects my actual values. Or did it arrive by absorption? By watching what was rewarded and what was punished, by understanding what the world praised and what it ignored, by taking the script that was handed to you and running it because everyone around you was running it, and the alternative felt too uncertain and too exposed and too much like the failure that society had already described for you. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to put the script down. Not dramatically, not by blowing up your life, but by doing the quiet, essential, fundamentally important work of deciding for yourself what enough actually looks like, what a good day actually feels like, what success means when you are the one defining it, rather than receiving the definition from outside. Society will call you a failure for that. I can promise you that. It will be wrong. Here is what I know now, at 74. After the collapse, and the brother-in-law, and the slow, painstaking work of unlearning 40 years of someone else's measurements and replacing them with my own. The scam is not malicious. I want to be clear about that. The people who handed you the script were not conspiring against you. Most of them were following it themselves. Most of them genuinely believed it, had absorbed it from the generation before them, and passed it on with the sincerity of people sharing something true. The script reproduces itself through sincere believers. That is what makes it so durable and so difficult to see from inside it. But sincerely believed does not mean correct. And the fact that everyone around you is following the same script does not make the script right. It makes it universal. There is a significant difference. The script has certain things in it that are genuinely useful. Security matters. Financial stability is real and important and not to be romanticized away. I am not standing here at 74 telling you that money is worthless and ambition is a trap. That would be its own kind of lie. What I am telling you is that the script contains these useful things surrounded by a great deal that is not useful at all, that is actively corrosive to the kind of life most people, if asked honestly and privately, actually want to live. The comparison, the status, the perpetual more, the external validation as the primary measurement of internal worth. Those things are in the script, not because they serve you, but because they serve the system the script is designed to sustain, and you are worth more than the system's requirements. Here is the warning, the specific direct warning I wish someone had given me at 35, with the clarity I am giving it to you now. The life you are working toward, if you are working toward it on the script's terms, will not feel the way you think it will feel when you arrive. I can tell you that from the specific personal experience of arriving. The income does not produce the peace it promises. The status does not produce the security it suggests. The accumulation does not fill the thing that the accumulation was supposed to fill. These are not theories. They are things I lived, things I watched the people around me live, things that are described with remarkable consistency by almost everyone who reaches the places the script points toward and reports back honestly. The brother-in-law's peace was not the consolation prize, it was the actual prize, and he found it not by failing to reach the script's destinations, but by declining to accept the script's destinations as the ones that mattered. You can do that too, not after you've arrived at the script's destinations and found them empty. Now, while you are still in the middle of the race, you can stop, look at the track, ask whether this is actually where you are trying to go, and begin, not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately and consistently, to walk in a direction that you have chosen rather than one you have inherited. Society will call it failure. Society will have opinions. Society always has opinions. Society is not going to live your life for you, and it is not going to be there at 74, sitting with the specific quality of a life lived on the wrong terms, and understanding too late that the terms were negotiable all along. So negotiate now, decide now, what does enough actually look like for you? What does a good day actually feel like when no one is watching and there is nothing to prove? What would you be building if the only person whose opinion of it mattered was the person who has to live inside it? Build that, not instead of responsibility alongside it, not instead of security within it, but build something that reflects your own values rather than borrowed ones, something that will not feel hollow when you arrive at it, something that society might call ordinary and that you will know privately and completely is extraordinary. Because extraordinary is not the size of the life, it is the fit of it. A life that fits who you actually are, that reflects your genuine values, your real preferences, your honest definition of enough, is more extraordinary than any amount of accumulation measured by someone else's scale. I found that out at 62. I have been living it since, and the years since have been quietly, unmistakably, without requiring anyone else's confirmation, the best years I have lived. You still have more of them ahead of you than I do. Please use them as yourself. If this reached something in you today, share it with someone still running the wrong race. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment. Tell me what success actually looks like when you are the one defining it. I read every one, every single one. There is more to say, there is always more. And at 74, every day I get to say, it feels like the right use of time.